Hi everybody and welcome back to Exotics of the World TV. Now in this episode we're going to go over some things that I wish I knew before keeping reptiles. Now keeping reptiles is an absolutely phenomenal experience and I wouldn't change it for the world. However, there are definitely some things that I have done in the past that I wish I'd had some better guidance on and that I could do differently. So whether if you're a new keeper and you're just starting out, maybe you can take some advice from this video, or if you're a seasoned keeper, you may be able to recognize some of the stories that I'm about to tell you. And with that being said, let's jump straight into the video. Please, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the content. And kicking us off, we're going to talk about the true cost of keeping reptiles. One big thing that people always overlook, it's not just about buying the animal itself and buying the equipment, it's the general day-to-day running costs. One big thing that people always overlook, it's not just about buying the animal itself, it's everything that comes along with it. Now, reptile equipment is not the cheapest, and if it is cheap reptile equipment, it's probably not that great. So you've got to take into account your heating, your lighting, your decorations, your substrate, your potential food bill, food bowls, water bowls, all sorts of different bits and bobs, even feeding equipment, handling equipment. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on the species, but you kind of get my drift. Another thing to tag onto this is full setups. Now, full setups for us, like on Facebook and Gumtree and stuff like that, they're an absolute pain in the backside for us. 9 times out of 10, the person that's buying it doesn't know what they're actually buying. They're just reading what it says on there and like, okay, yeah, it says it's a full setup for a insert reptile here. And 9 times out of 10, it's really not. And there are lots of things that people need to do to tweak them to meet the modern day standards of animal and reptile welfare. Now, we have a very strict policy in here that we need to see proof of setup before we can let any animal go. Now, we do this to stop further harm to the hobby. So if people are going out with like bad setups, bad care advice, etc., it's going to have a long-term effect on how people keep their reptiles. So that person will carry on that poor husbandry practice that they may have got from somewhere else, that type of thing. But side questing a little bit, let's get more back onto like the full setups online. Now, if you are a seasoned keeper, this is going to be a little bit different for you. So you're going to know what to look for. You're going to know what to ask. You're going to ask the right questions. If you're first starting out and you've never had reptiles at all in your life, or maybe you've got 1 to 2, and you're still on that, I'm not 100% sure what I'm really looking for, I don't really understand what all this equipment does, etc., then my advice to you would be don't do it.
It's a trap!
If you're seen on Gumtree, Facebook, full setup for sale, honestly, don't do it. It is not worth the time. And then what happens when you get the full setup? 1, it's either really not compatible with the species that you want, or 2, you're going to need to add a lot of stuff in there, like especially heating and lighting. Now, the vivariums themselves, okay, they cost obviously like a little bit, but they don't cost as much potentially like your heating and lighting will. And that's the kicker. Another true cost of reptile keeping is when you see like free to a good home, or they're selling an animal very cheaply online because they just want to kind of like get rid of it. We usually find when this happens, these animals have really not been kept in good condition, and it might end up costing you later down the line in terms of vet bills. Now, if you are happy, obviously, with that, then that's absolutely fine. If you're trying to rescue the animal through like noble means and stuff, fantastic, go ahead. But again, if you're just starting out and you want a pet and you've never kept before, just avoid that altogether. Another true cost of reptile keeping, this might be a little bit of like philosophical potentially, but it's your time and your energy. Okay, so taking care of these animals, it does take up quite a lot of time. Now, when you've got 1 to 2 to 3, obviously it's not that much, but when you are going and getting more and more, then that's where the true cost really comes out. I mean, I can remember back in the day when I had absolutely tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of reptiles. It would probably take me a good like couple of hours a day to go through everything and make sure everything was okay. This is adding on top of obviously what I had to do in terms of going to college, going to university, having a job, maintaining a social life, etc., etc. So it all does add up. And moving on to number 2. So this is that not all reptiles are beginner friendly. Now obviously this goes without saying, but for those that are just starting out into keeping like reptiles and stuff like that, yeah, not everything's going to be like your bearded dragon, leopard gecko, or crested gecko. And really do your research into it. And it's really important you do so. So, for example, I'll give you a little anecdote of what happened around here in 2024 in I think it was the summer. It was definitely the summer. So, somebody had bred their Burmese pythons and reticulated pythons. Now, I'm not going to go into should they have done that or shouldn't they have. It's not really my place to say at this point. We're just going to talk about this more widely. So this person that had bred these very large snakes was selling them to like beginners that have never had snakes and stuff before, and they were selling them very, very, very cheaply. So I think they were around about £30 to £50, depending on who bought them. But we had a spate of people coming in, and they were like, "Well, yeah, I've just bought this reticulated ball python," and we're like, "What, a reticulated ball python? Okay, show us." It wasn't. It was a reticulated python, and then the other one, it was a Burmese ball python. It's just a colour morph. I was like, okay, fantastic. No, these were them. And it happened quite a lot. We had quite a lot of people in, and they were none the wiser. Now, you could argue that it was the person's fault that actually bought them, but a lot of blame should be laid, obviously, on the person that bred them. Now, I have compassion for the conned and contempt for the con man, to quote James O'Brien, a political commentator here in the UK. As annoying as it is that these people didn't do their research, at the end of the day, if they're going to somebody that they think is like a specialist, well, he's bred snakes, he's done this, he's done that, then they're obviously going to think that. There'd be no different for someone coming here, for example, and like me going, "Oh yeah, Burmese pythons make absolutely fantastic pets for people." Like, oh, definitely. You want a reticulated python? Yeah. You got chihuahuas? Oh, I love your chihuahuas. It'll get on with them so well. It's kind of like the same thing. So I don't really blame the people that bought them. Should they have done some more research into it? 100%. I mean, we always recommend, like, when people come in here and they want to buy something, we always recommend doing a little bit of background research. Obviously, it's going to be difficult because there's quite a lot of conflicting information out there. Even like me, for example, we give out advice that a lot of other people like don't really agree with, but we know what works best for us, and we tend to use like science to kind of back it up with. Another key important of kind of like doing your research to make sure that these like species are like beginner friendly is in fact knowing like what social groupings as well, like that you can house these animals in. So nowadays we typically don't really recommend cohabbing most reptiles, e.g. bearded dragons, but people still do it. We get calls on the daily, can I house 2 bearded dragons together in 3-foot fish tanks, and etc. Now, we're not going to talk about cohabbing bearded dragons per se. We're just going to talk about, again, social groupings on the whole. It's really important to really know what you're doing. Like social groupings in terms of mourning geckos, absolutely fine. Other species, potentially not so much. So definitely do your research beforehand. And moving on to number 3, the importance of appropriate UVB lighting and appropriate heating. So when I first started keeping reptiles quite a long time ago now, I literally shudder at the way I used to keep them. Literally, again, 2 bearded dragons in a 4x2x2 setup, compact UVB, and a ceramic heater. I mean, even by those standards, like back then, it still was a little bit naff. And realistically, the shop that I bought them from should have told me different. Because at the end of the day, T8 bulbs were just coming like on the scene when I first started keeping like reptiles. So they were definitely there. T5s were quite a way off at this point, but I still could have been providing my animals with better care. Now, I'm not asking everybody to like be really well read up on like heating and lighting and stuff like that. You don't need to go into like the depths of it and start becoming a bit of a physicist. All we kind of need to like know is the basics. So why light good? Why light bad? Why need this light? Why not need that light? So literally, that's all we need to know. Because otherwise, if we don't, we're still going to see really bad health issues happen in our animal. Luckily, we don't see that many cases of metabolic bone disease come through the door. However, we still see, I would honestly say, more than we should. Now, when we have animals come through the door, it can be through rescue or it can be through health checks. Now, the ones that we get through health checks, they don't have it that bad. It's when when animals come in for health checks, it's usually because they're a little bit too chunky and overweight. Very rarely is it through metabolic bone disease. It's usually the rescues. Now, obviously, you can't talk all the time to the people that have brought it in on rescue, because 9 times out of 10, like, they've found it somewhere, or it's been in they're a landlord and it's been in their house and the tenant's just done a backdoor boogie and kind of like left the animal there. We get that quite a lot, which is really, really sad. But metabolic bone disease realistically shouldn't be a thing like in the hobby. We have the ways, we have the means that we can completely eradicate it. Now, we see MBD more in crepuscular and nocturnal species than we do in diurnal, because I think most people nowadays know that, okay, bearded dragons do need this light and appropriate lighting as well. Like compact curly whirly bulbs or anything like that, we don't sell in here at all because they are absolutely enough. Like, what is the point? Really, when you can get a better bulb that doesn't need to be replaced as often and gives out better quality UV. And moving on to our next topic now. So this one is a little bit sad and it might touch some nerves with people potentially, but there are 2 points to this. So number 1, over rescuing reptiles, and number 2, taking animals on too quickly. So I'll tackle number 2 first, and then we'll go into rescuing, because I think it's a little bit more nuanced than it just being black and white like that. So, take animals on too quickly. I honestly, I wish I had somebody that was in my corner back in the day when I first started keeping, go, look, don't get too many because it will become too much. You'll be overwhelmed. Now, when you get too many reptiles, not only will it have a negative impact on your mental health, but it'll also have a negative impact on all of the animals' welfare that are in your care. Now, I am talking from personal experience. Now, there are some people that have got extensive collections and they look after them really well. Obviously, this doesn't apply to them. But for the vast majority of people, they just get them in very quick succession. Like, they'll start off with 1, then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 7, then it's 15, then it's 50 odd. Like, we see it quite a lot. And my advice to anybody that's just starting out is take it slow. Like, really, really take it slow. Yes, it's cool. Everybody loves keeping reptiles. Like, they're absolutely amazing. But just think about your capacity as well. Do you have the capacity to look after all of these different species? Or realistically, have you just got the capacity for 3 or 4? And just having capacity for 3 or 4 is absolutely fine. Like, you don't need to have, like, zoo level type collections in your little terraced house. Like, it's fine not to. If you just want them as pets, you want 3 or 4, again, absolutely fine. No one's going to judge for that. Moving on to the rescuing side. So this is difficult for me. So I think you can probably tell that I'm really struggling on this one because it's a really upsetting topic, to be fair. Now, I just want to get out there. I'm not saying don't rescue reptiles. Okay, it's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, again, very similar to what I've just spoke about. Have you got the capacity to rescue these animals? And what are you going to do with them once you have rescued them? Are you then going to rehome them? Or are you going to keep them? Etc. etc. So in 2024, we attended three kind of like startup kind of rescues where people that have previously kept reptiles started keeping. Okay. Now, two of them got in contact and they said, look, it's too much. We don't have the capacity to look after all of these animals. Can you help us out? And of course, like, we've got a very large capacity here, not only in housing, but in terms of like staff and team, etc., etc. It's definitely doable for us to take more on than the average Joe. So these two, I mean, they gave us quite a lot of animals that needed rehoming. But that was good because they asked us, you know. The last one that I'm going to talk about was probably one of the most horrific cases of neglect I have ever seen in my life. So we get a call from an agent, not like a secret agent, a landlord's agent, and we went down to this property. Now I'm not going to say where it was or anything like that. But they were out of the house. We were called to get the reptiles and stuff. So the context, the RSPCA had already been in, and they had removed, from my knowledge, they had removed animals, and they'd also removed dead animals as well, both dogs and cats. Now, there just wasn't just cats. There was also savannah cats and stuff like that in there. There was feces all up the wall. There was flies absolutely everywhere. It was literally like a section out of The Exorcist. There was that many flies. It was horrific, and the smell, I'll never forget it. Like it still sticks in the back of my mouth now. It was gross, and that's just as we walk in through the door. Now, as we go in and we look at all of the rooms, there are tons and tons and tons of dead reptiles. Now, this person had started out with a very noble idea of wanting to rescue and rehome reptiles. Absolutely perfect, brilliant, fantastic. Now, from point A to where we were, obviously some things had happened in between that. But I think realistically, there was a book left and it had all the animals that were in. And we could see by the amount of dead animals that were there as well how many the person had. I have to try and laugh, otherwise I will actually cry because it was horrific. I mean, in fact, on the actual day, I think I did. And subsequently afterwards, a couple of days after, I would just start bailing because proper Ian bailing. It was just horrible to see all these like decaying animals, and the very few animals that were alive were in very, 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 very bad condition. Luckily, the ones that we rescued, apart from one, we managed to get some weight on, get them really healthy again, get them vet checked, etc., etc. So it was a positive outcome for those species. But it's a cautionary tale in general. It is really a cautionary tale. Like, do you have the capacity? So again, in 2024, we had to stop taking animals on. Now, that might be like a scratchy head time. It got to the point where we were kind of like, look, if we take any more on, we're going to meet our capacity that we keep talking and telling people about. Like this is enough. I mean, at one point we had, I think, like close to 200 leopard geckos. Leopard geckos, close to 200. Like, it was absolutely crazy. Luckily, obviously, we rehomed all of them. It was a really big effort. Some went to Scotland. Some went, obviously, like down south to Cornwall. Some to Northern Ireland. Like, so yeah, it was a really big team effort from everybody trying to find these animals homes and stuff. But yeah, anyway, sorry, side questing. Cautionary tale. Yeah, we had to stop taking our animals on. So the point I'm trying to make is don't overexert yourself. If you know that your capacity is, for example, 200 leopard geckos, then your capacity is 200 leopard geckos. As soon as you start going over that, those 200 leopard geckos, their welfare is then potentially going to start to be impacted by your negligence. Now, that isn't to say that you're not trying to do the right thing, but by you trying to do the right thing, you're kind of doing the wrong thing. It's like that Batman quote, isn't it? It's like you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. And I think in this situation, the person that had all these reptiles did live long enough to become the villain. But again, unfortunately, these things happen, and we see it time and time again. Now, again, the animals that were rescued had a great outcome. They were rehomed. They're quite happy. I mean, we've still got some of them now because some of them had a lot of trauma. So we've got them. We're doing training with them, but in general, it was a positive outcome. And finally, is vets and vet care. Now, when you look online, you'll see people asking questions like, what is it with my bearded dragon? What is this? What is that? Now, for me personally, I find it quite frustrating, especially when people give out advice. Like, we are not legally allowed to give out medical advice here because we are not trained vets, and neither are the people, for the most part, that are on these online forums. So my advice would be, first off, before anything happens, you've just got your animal, try and find a vet, meet your vet beforehand, come up with some sort of rapport, get to know each other, bring the animal as well to the vet so the vet can see the animal, just so you've got that relationship beforehand. So I've got quite a few friends that are vets, and the one thing near enough all of them say is that it's really good to build up that relationship with that animal and with the owners before something bad happens. Now, vet care obviously is not cheap. It's probably one of the downsides to owning animals. If anything goes wrong, it can be quite costly. So potentially look at insurance, maybe even look at your practice. Some practices do like kind of like an in-house like insurance thing. But if not, what you can do is you can, in a sense, pay for your own insurance. So what I mean by that is setting a little bit of money aside each month and then popping it into a separate bank account. So you're going to constantly be like adding more and more and more and more in there. So in the event, if the animal does need veterinary treatment, then you've got something to kind of fall back on. And also with insurances, I would definitely make sure to read the fine print. This is where they get you. But yeah, I mean, in general, I wouldn't really recommend kind of like posting like your issues that you've got with your, like, let's say it's a bearded dragon. I wouldn't recommend posting the issues that you got with your bearded dragon online or anything like that. Okay, it's more costly, but go to a vet. I mean, I would rather be safe than sorry, and you can kind of nip an issue in the bud already. So I'll give you an example. It's not really reptile related, but it's dog related. So you might be able to get a better understanding from that. But we have a customer who came in and their dog had a really bad infection. Now, I told them, I was like, look, she probably needs to go to the vet. Like, just take her to the vet, blah, 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 blah. No. I've read online that it's that all the animal needs is like prune juice or like basically some like wacky like herbal kind of like method type thing. And I was like, but it's got an infection. Like, you could easily sort this out. But anyway, at this point, the dog was still like happy. Like, she's a bit, obviously, you can tell a bit under the weather, but still like doing dog things. And then a week went by. Dog really wasn't looking very well. Another week went by. She didn't bring the dog in because it was that sick. It then started having really bad like diarrhea and stuff like that. Anyway, fast forward, eventually she takes it to the vet because obviously this herbal malarkey wasn't working. It ended up costing her 500, I think, in fact, it might have been more actually. But I think as a base level, let's just say 500. It cost her like £500. Whereas if she'd have taken that animal to the vet there and then, it would have cost her, depending obviously a consultation fee, but it would have cost her around about £40 to £50 consultation fee, and then maybe a short round of antibiotics, and then it would have been done. But instead, because they waited like online and for online responses and whatnot, the outcome was that the person ended up having to pay a lot more. So don't be scared of vets. A lot of people are scared of vets. Don't be. They are there to help at the end of the day. Obviously, they're there to take your money. But this is where it's good to try and find a vet that you trust. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Those are some of the biggest things I wish that I had known before taking reptiles on. Maybe you can see some of you in those stories. I know I have, especially with overstretching and taking on more reptiles than I probably should have done, and rescuing as well. I've been victim of that, but that's what we're here for. We're here for moving forward, giving sound advice, and helping guidance. But yeah, anyway, that's been me. If you did like the video, please make sure that you give us a like, share, and a subscribe, and also ping that bell icon when you'll be notified when we release new videos. But yeah, right. Anyway, see you later. Ta-ra, loves.